And before we get going, here's a word about our sponsors. SDHQ Motorsport is a powerhouse 30,000 square foot facility with 45 family members reporting for duty. This single owner, single location business is based out of Gilbert, Arizona. It can handle anything from a hot rod, daily driver, pre-runner, race vehicle, half-track or Kugelwagen, or just about any other project you need help with. Their skilled staff with hundreds of years of combined experience eats, sleeps, and breathes performance. So go check them out at sdhqmotorsports.com or check them out on Insta at sdhqmotorsports. The We Happy Few 506 podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Gettysburg Museum of History, home of the Major Dick Winters collection and the largest assortment of authentic Band of Brothers artifacts in the world. Visit the free museum at 219 Baltimore Street in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, or at www.gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com, and on the YouTube channel, The History Underground, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Well, hello, while I locate my microphone. Hello, and welcome to this week's We Happy Few 506 podcast, The Nearly Men, with myself and the beautiful Doug Allen in Berlin. Dougie, how you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thanks. And how are you? I must say, you do look well. And our viewers or listeners won't know this, but when I got on the podcast this evening, he wasn't wearing a shirt.
I
So
cannot wear a
putting the
shirt,
shirt
but
on, I feel like
I
you're
can just...
denying what the fans want to see,
All right,
Matthew.
okay, only till the guest comes on. Yeah, I'm up a mountain, so it's a little warm here, so I have my shirt off. But as you wanted me to have my shirt off, that's fine. We can have a shirt off. What are you doing in Berlin? How's your German coming along? I'm bringing that back.
Yeah, no, I haven't practiced at all. Like I was just speaking to my neighbor yesterday about it. I'm going to start a course in September. I'm going to go back to school and try it again because I did it last year, did it for about a month and a half, and then got so fed up with it. And what with everything else that's going on, I just completely stopped practicing completely. But now it's time to, you know, it's time to really practice it because I'm sort of at the beginning of a new relationship with actually a woman that lives in this block. She's really lovely, Nadine. And
Yay!
yeah, and she's got three sons. She's a single
Okay.
parent with three sons. She's amazing. And of course they speak a little bit of English, but
Right.
I've really got to communicate, especially with the
Yeah,
youngest
you
one,
do.
Noah, and he's only 8. So, it's very difficult to kind of communicate and kind of build a relationship with them as well. So she's been pestering me to go back to school. She keeps giving me hints, like giving me Noah's little children's books. Like, why didn't you start with that? It's like, what?
That
But
is a hungry, hungry caterpillar.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I've got that to look forward to. So I'm going to start that in September. There's been researching schools. My twin sister's been over with her son. She was over last week, so that was really good to see her. And yeah, we've had a good summer here. It's been really nice weather. We've had a lot of rain, but
Right.
it's just about to. I think the rest of Europe's got a heat wave at the minute. I think it's in like sort of the mid 30s, but here it's like mid 20s. It's absolutely perfect.
Oh,
And
lovely.
Berlin empties in August because all Berliners, that's when they go away. And it's just noticeable. The parks are empty, the roads are empty. It's actually a really nice time to be here. So yeah, I'm just enjoying the summer here. No, you know, deliberately not traveling anywhere. I'm gonna go back to England and see my dad, probably for a weekend in September. But I'm not doing any other traveling. I haven't been out of the city for over a year now. Um,
Wow.
yeah, just because of like all the other stuff, I was having treatment and stuff like that and therapy and stuff. So I had to kind of base myself around here, and I've got no money either. But yeah, it's been actually really nice, sort of having the option of going away, taken away from you, just through being skint and other stuff, has been quite nice just to kind of relax into the city. But I am looking forward to getting out a little bit. A friend of my best sort of German friend is actually in England at the moment for a month with his wife and kid. And he's given me the keys to his apartment, which is in Pankow, which is in the north of the city.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm going to stay there for a few nights this week. It'll be like a holiday because it's just a different part of Berlin. That's as good as my holidays are going to get,
I
you
want
know.
to find myself a German apartment in Berlin.
Yeah. But it's been good.
I don't want to
I've been
listen
watching
to
the
any
Olympics.
dialogue.
Have you
Oh
watched
yeah,
any
I
of
don't
the
want to listen.
Olympics?
Yeah. Oh man. So is it the same with you? But like you watch the Olympics and you turn it on and it's just like incredible. Like I was
Yeah.
watching the synchronized diving, right? And I'm watching these two dudes and I can't, it just looks incredible to me, especially as I go down a pool regularly here and I can basically belly flop off a diving board, right? And then there's this there's this lady who's like the co-commentator on NBC, and she clearly was a diver. So she
Mm.
starts talking you through what's happening and why that's a good dive. And then she'll start telling you, and so you're like, all right, I'm getting it now. I've seen it. And then she'll start telling you what they've done wrong, like, oh, their legs were a bit far apart. And then suddenly you just become an expert. And I'm like, oh, that was a crap dive. Legs are too far apart. You junked that completely. What were you thinking?
Yeah, it's all about the splash, isn't it? A lot of it.
You're all about the flash. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes they go in the water, or very rarely. When you see the Chinese divers, and it almost seems like the water just goes in; it doesn't come out
Yeah.
at all. And then there's an English guy. I think he's recovering a lot from injury. I think he finished like 10th or 11th. He got into the final in the 10-meter board, but he had it looked like almost like the amount of splash. There was almost no water left in the pool. He kind of really screwed it up. But when you see a perfect dive, it is absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? The
Yeah.
control they have. And when they do their spins, how close their head comes to the board. Like it always freaks me out. Like, because they look like they're so close to like this concrete slab.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 10
Do you ever
meters is,
remember Greg? Do you remember Greg Louganis smashing his head that time?
no, I don't know. What is
The world
it? What in the
champion
Olympics?
diver.
Was it in the
Yeah, it was either Olympics or World Champions or something like that. And it was like it was back in like the 80s, I think, or early
mm,
90s. And he used to. It was one that was really high up that doesn't really have a diving board. It's just a concrete slab, but you're
yeah, it's 10
way high
meter.
up. Right, so it's 10 meters. So he's up in the 10 meter, and his first maneuver was to tuck and backward roll
Oh,
off that, and he just smashed the back
oh,
of his head and just dropped like a stone.
yeah.
It was horrendous.
But the synchronized, I remember. So one of them came up on my Instagram feed, and it might have been the couple of guys that won it. And I watched it, and I thought it was one diver because it was from the side. It was so good. I never saw the other diver. It was only when the
Yeah, but
splash came, there were two splashes, and I was like, "What?" I mean, the
well,
training they
they
go through.
yeah they were conjoined twins, so I think that's cheating. To be honest with you.
What other sports did you like?
All of them, mate. I don't like any of the sports that I like in normal life, like the rugby. I could do without and all that stuff. I don't want to see the
Interesting,
Olympics.
yeah.
No,
Football,
although
not
except the
interested. Yeah,
rugby, no, except the rugby was cool because Antoine Dupont won the gold medal for France, and I would leave my wife for that guy. But I
right.
like things like archery, shooting. There's anything like I would never normally watch, and just like
Yeah,
this is wicked.
I do like I like the traditional athletics.
Oh
Like
yeah, the sprint
you
as
got the
well.
400, the 800, the 15, and then the long jump and the, javelin, discus, shot put are really cool. But I kind of it's great for the obscure sports
Yeah, it is.
like the shooting and the archery and all these kind of I don't know things that you just don't normally see. And and obviously the track cycling's been brilliant. They have races in them. I was watching one today. I think it's called uh, Madison or Omnium or something. And there's like 30 riders or something, and they go around, they do 120 laps. You've got no idea who's in the lead. There's sprints, there's teams of two, there's crashes everywhere. And you've got people talking about getting points for a sprint. There's a sprint every 5 laps and you get the belt. You have no idea what's going on. It just looks like utter chaos. And then it seems like they just pick someone for the winner. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, did you
See, I
watch
think I didn't, but I think those types of sports do encourage people to get high because being utterly baked, you understand stuff like that. So
it?
I think that's just for the the stoner Olympics. Like, yeah, dude,
Yeah,
too. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
There, there
He
was
was my
the
dick.
there was this Turkish guy that did well at the pistol shooting that
Oh
became
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like you wear jeans, and I think he said when he won silver, yeah, I think his speech was "Tell my wife I want my dog back, my ex-wife." That was his speech. It was absolutely brilliant, and people have been sort of doing his pose, the hand in the
yeah,
jeans pocket. He doesn't
yeah.
wear any team clothing. He just turns up in his jeans and he's constantly out the back smoking cigarettes. Apparently, He got a silver medal. He
That's
took it
so
up
wicked.
in his divorce, like
Oh
in
wow.
COVID.
Because I
It's,
saw him and I assumed like some passing assassin had decided to just give it a go. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Because he looked like an
that's
assassin.
that's what I think it is. Yeah.
I'll show him what. See how good I am. I might be good. I don't know. Did you see
Yeah.
Did you see the English girl, the Mancunian girl, win the 800?
No, which one was that? Was that what's her name?
You know, it's like
Muir? Is it Muir? No.
Keely Hodgkinson or something like that. Her name is, and
No, I didn't see that.
she is incredible, incredible. She
Mm.
is about a foot taller. She's just this pale, willowy blonde girl with a ponytail.
Mm.
Just smoked everybody. It looked like she was in third gear the entire way around. And the
And
commentator
the
was like,
eight,
I don't think she doesn't know how far she can go. She's incredible.
yeah, the 800 is the hardest event to train for in the body, apparently, because you're up at this sort of strange level of lack of oxygen where you're breathing so heavy, like it's like you have aerobic and then anaerobic, and then
Yeah.
the 800 is above there, and like you're absolutely knackered from like 150 meters into it, and then you just have to keep going for 2 laps. It looks absolutely, apparently for training, especially on running, that's the hardest one. But I watched there's this crazy, I think he's Norwegian guy that won the 1500 or the 5000 meters, 15 and no, he didn't win the 1500, but I think he
No,
won the 5K and he just
yeah, an
smoked
American.
everyone, or
Yeah.
10K.
Yeah, there is
Beating
a
all the
Norwegian,
Kenyans.
Ingerson, I think his name is. Ingerson is the
Yeah, that's right.
Norwegian. But yeah, yeah.
And he beat all the Kenyans and which is kind of, they normally rule the roost in that sort of middle distance running.
Yeah, that was the same with this English girl. Like, it was all like sort of Kenyans, Ethiopians, Americans, do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And then just this she'll just freaking smoke them. And honestly, I know what you're saying is true because I think I've tried to run 800 meters and nearly died.
Yeah.
Uh, but she wasn't breaking a sweat. I mean, she didn't break a
Wow.
sweat. It was
Wow.
incredible. Like Roger Federer played tennis. Dude, I
Was
got to
was
put
she was she the was it her first Olympics as well?
Uh, I think no, I think she missed. I think she might have got silver last time, and then silver in the World Championships. She's like the perennial silver girl,
Yeah,
and then she's just upped her
she
game
just smoked
bonkers.
it. It's been
Yeah,
great,
and it's
isn't it?
great.
It finishes well, it finished today, yeah, but it's been really great to watch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because she's from Manchester, and it was like she did the lap, and then she's got a Union Jack flag, and she just ran over to her parents, who just look like two people from Manchester. She looks like an otherworldly species, like next generation human, and she's just got like this fat Mancunian dad and your wife with the bobbed hair. Looked like they just came in for a Toby Carvery, you know. I was like, how did you think he's hurt?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Incredible. I
Yeah, no,
think with
it has been great to watch. It has been really, really interesting, and it's great to give because like the training for these, like the training, the work versus reward is so heavily focused on the work.
yeah,
You
it's
know, like
mad. Yeah,
once, like it's not like footballers that seem like the reward versus work is almost the other way round. They do train, but you're part of a team, you're getting paid millions and all the rest of it. You're always in the public eye. While Olympians and like track and field athletes, they train like in the middle of nowhere for like 4 years for this 1 2 weeks. And if anything goes wrong, it totally screws it. It's not like they get paid anything, it's kind of, yeah, it's really
yeah.
amazing.
You
Isn't it?
tread
Yeah.
on a pebble on the way out. Those 4 years done for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I think I think our guest is trying to join, but we'll
Yeah,
carry
he's
on.
trying to connect
I can
into
see like
audio. It's taken him a long time, but it's allowed Matthew to put his shirt back on, so that's good.
yeah, so I don't scare the clergy. Yeah, I he's it's Adam. Oh wait, hang on. I think he may have connected. He's not got his audio on. It's Adam Buck. So well, I'll let him. Hey Adam, how you doing?
Hi,
Good.
Adam.
How are you guys doing?
Doing good,
Very
man.
well.
You've gone for the books in the background look, I see.
Well, less clutter that way. Yeah.
Very
Very COVID.
studious.
Very COVID. I love it.
Yeah, you've got what is that section of books just behind you that are all in color coordination?
Oh,
Just
all
on
of these.
the other side of your ear, there's a books that are in color coordinated blocks. Yeah, what are they?
Right. That is the Automobile Quarterly series. It actually starts actually all three of these shelves and the one behind me, all great articles from like 1960, late 50s, all the way through the 2000s on antique automobiles, cars, racing.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
don't get Doug started
I
on
know. What's
this.
it called
Oh,
again? That looks
I'm
fantastic.
off to
What's it
go
called
get a cup
again?
of tea.
Automobile Quarterly. Yeah.
Automobile Courtly. I'm definitely going to be a subscriber to that.
Yeah. I haven't read them all, but they're great. Yeah. These are mostly all car books. I got all the military ones on another shelf.
Cool. Well, let me introduce you, Adam, because well, you've sort of slid into our podcast, and I'm pretty poor at introducing people. To the listeners and perhaps the viewers on YouTube, firstly, I apologize for doing the first bit semi-naked. Doug dared me. So we've got Adam Buck on the show now. Adam, can you explain your role with the World War II American Experience Museum in Gettysburg, please, so that I don't mess it up?
Absolutely. So I'm the president at the World War II American Experience Museum. I took over from my late father, who founded it, along with my mother. About 3 years ago, we opened, and my father had been collecting for about 60 years, World War II vehicles, memorabilia, artifacts. And we opened, like I said, 2.5 years ago. We are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. We're just 3 miles north of Gettysburg, have Sherman tanks, military trucks, Jeeps, half tracks, helmets, some
Wow.
airborne items. And essentially, what we're trying to do is encompass the home front, the battlefront, really bring it all together, hit on the arsenal of democracy. It had been a dream for a long time, especially for my father, to open this up to the public. So we come from this from being collectors and now letting the public see it and share it and hopefully garner more support and get more
Wow.
people into World War II history.
So,
Um,
how did your father, how did his passion first begin with collecting the memorabilia? Because there's a lot of people that, including myself and everyone that probably listens to this podcast, has a passion for going, for that historic, that historical element, of conflict. But what led him to start buying kind of artifacts and machinery from the war?
So a couple things. He was born in 1942 and growing up as a kid, like everybody's relative or father was in the war. And, like everybody else, they played Army. Of course, back then it was with real bring back souvenirs and so forth. But that always interested him. The vets, especially the ones he worked with when he was a teenager at a local Chevrolet dealership at lunchtime, they'd sit around and tell stories about World War II, and he and the other young guys would listen intently. And he was in the automotive business, then went out, opened up his own service station, and got into towing. And that was 1965. So what was available? Surplus World War II wreckers. So you mix that interest in World War II history and then the vehicular component, and you get military vehicles, you get World War II history. So he got into it kind of at the prime time in the 80s and 90s when a lot of these vets were in their 60s and 70s. He had met probably a couple thousand World War II vets between 1990 and 2005, for example. And Sherman tanks, you could buy them for 15 grand unrestored and restore them. And so it was really kind of like the Wild West for collecting at that time. And he hosted a lot of World War II veterans reunions, Ninth Armored, some airborne engineer. So we got to meet a lot of guys, even Dick Winters before all the fame and stardom with Band of Brothers, Windsor Miller, who was first across, actually, pardon me, second tank across the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, but first column of Sherman tanks across. So people like that are really interesting and really kind of inspired him to keep collecting and open up a museum, tell their stories.
Wow.
um, so I'm going to get on to the museum because I actually came there last weekend for the symposium, W Britain Symposium. But before I sort of describe it to people and where it's incredible, it's an incredible museum, and I'll get onto that in a second. When you said your father hosted the events and the vets and collected before, where was he located? Because Gettysburg's a pretty small. Was it in Gettysburg?
So we moved to Gettysburg in about 1998, and
Okay.
I was too young to remember, but we had reunions here at the farm, and that was I say here at the farm. That's where I'm filming from. Essentially, we have a farm where we held a lot of the vehicles before the museum was opened up and stored them there, restored them, and so forth. So we hosted a lot of veterans reunions there before the museum was ever, drawn up on the maps, on blueprints, or anything like that. And prior to that, my dad lived in the Pocono Mountains, northeastern Pennsylvania, and he held many veterans reunions there. In fact, if the veterans reunion wasn't close by, he'd go to it and in force. In I think 1994 or five, he took a Sherman tank to a reunion for the Ninth Armored and a couple other vehicles. And there's a lot of great photos of all the guys on the tank and with the big banner, with Ninth Armored, with all their credentials and so forth.
Is the
Wow.
current building the first museum?
It's the first museum, but not the first building.
Okay.
So,
Now, I'm just going to describe it a little bit and then you can crack on with what you were saying because,
mhm.
like I said, there was a symposium there last weekend with the W Britain guys who make the figurines, the sledge figurine that is in our store. And so I didn't know it was there. I've spent a bit of time in Gettysburg now and again. I didn't know it was there. And I got this sort of the address and put the pin in. And you drive through Gettysburg for those of you who've been there. It's sort of like Main Street, sort of old town. And then it's got all the battlefield and everything. You sort of go out of town a little bit. And then suddenly on the left, it's like you're just driving into Normandy. It looks like something from San Marigli. Doug, I mean, you spent a bunch of time in Normandy. You know those big, like the D-Day experience museums and
Yeah.
they're sort of built kind of like a hangar and they've got tanks
Mm.
in them and big car park and everything. Suddenly there's a bloody great museum there. I was like, I didn't know this was here. Is it deliberately designed like one of the Norman museums? Or was that just like coincidence?
Well, it's no lie to say that the museums and the activity in Normandy was a large inspiration for us. We've been over there numerous times. I was over there this June, and we would always take, I kid you not, thousands of photos while there, museums, exhibits, and just harness some ideas, draw inspiration from that. So, Um, and another thing, we have the biggest American flag in the county, and my father was always proud of that. So, like Matt said, you come down that hill from Gettysburg, and boom, right there in your face, huge American flag, a couple of vehicles out front,
Oh, you can
and
see it from Baltimore, actually.
yeah, they use it for a beacon when they land at the airports. Yeah.
And then left at the flag. Yeah. No, sorry, carry on.
So yeah, going to these museums over the years, it was really helpful, and we're trying to do that here in Gettysburg, and Gettysburg and St. Mary Glees are sister cities, and you'll see the signs. We had replicas made of the ones in St. Mary Glees, and trying to hit upon some of these points, and we're just getting started. Like I said, we opened up 2.5 years ago, and everything's gone really well so far, but I'd like to expand in the future and enhance the displays, put more items on exhibit, rotate things. So, what you saw on display is just the beginning. We have a lot of things in the plans, a lot of vehicles that are not even on display. There's about 40 vehicles in the back of the museum, all World War II, that run that are not open to the public for display yet. However,
So,
that building soon will be.
so are you continuously kind of looking to find other artifacts and machinery? And what I'm interested in is how you said your father obviously spent a lot of time with veterans on their battalion reunions and such like. So, how have you conveyed the stories? Is this have you is was it your father speaking with them and using the veterans that he'd met to kind of convey a particular story about a piece of machinery? I'm just kind of wondering how you've kind of got that human element over with telling some of the stories of bravery behind where these machines operated.
Absolutely. So the framework of the museum kind of drew upon his idols, the vets that really meant something to him. For example, David Pergrin, Colonel, 291st Combat Engineers, put the bridge across the Rhine,
Wow.
longest tactical bridge at that time, put up in, I think, 32 hours under fire. He had met him many times. So What do we have in the museum? We have engineer equipment, trucks, bridging trucks, air compressor trucks, all the tools, quad mount 50s, which they had there to protect the bridge. And so we bring those items to life with the stories of the vets that he knew and others, some that we didn't know, many we did not know, but we have items from them or anecdotes from family members, things to kind of put the picture together. Because when people walk up to a truck, it might just be a truck. They all look the same, but you
Mm.
Yeah.
really have to illustrate what its capabilities were, what its purpose was, and what did the people that used it originally, what did they go through? And that's what really gets people's attention. And one thing we like to do at our museum is we give free tours. And I can tell you it's a very rewarding task because you'll take people around and they might look at something, for example, like an Indian motorcycle that we have, and I'll tell them a little bit about its history. And I'll say, well, did you know that the owner of this bike had relatives that went down on the Titanic? And they'll look at me and go, I had no idea. Of course, how would they know that? But
Yeah.
we have it written there, but sometimes people glance over those things. So, and that's an example that takes you outside the World War II realm. But when people hear these snippets of info, it really grabs their attention, and people really they want to learn more about these things, and you kind of have to build upon um, the information that's provided to you and
Mm.
paint that
Was it
picture.
was it quite challenging to curate, where things go and what things do? Because, some of those museums in Normandy and France, around France and in Belgium, you walk around them and everything's kind of not necessarily chronological, but do you know what I mean? There is always a storyline around it when you go to any kind of exhibition or even a modern art gallery, it's the same. Did you find that
Yeah.
quite challenging? And how did
Can
you?
I just interject there and just double down on your point, Doug, which is a brilliant point. I've never considered it. Is when then, and maybe Adam could talk about this afterwards, is that when putting this collection together, I'd never considered vehicles having the story. Do you know what I mean? Like, because
Mm,
they're so cool. Like, you go to a tank museum, it's just like, damn, that's a cool tank. Damn, that's a cool truck. And in Adam's museum, you can actually ride around on them sometimes if you've been very nice to him.
mm,
But so going back to Doug's question, like, so how do you curate the correct vehicles to tell the correct stories? And is that drawn? You may have answered this previously. Is that drawn from personal stories? And then you're like, okay, so if I'm following through, the first guy over in Remagen or whatever, I then need this vehicle and that vehicle as well. Or do you just collect a bunch of vehicles and think, right, we'll tell this story for a while and put those out back, and then this story for a while and tell them out back? Because I'm the type of guy that walks around the tank museum thinking everything's really cool. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I've been to many tank museums that have the personal story with it, like
mm,
a grunt size story. It tends to be quite an overview. This tank, its capabilities with this, it could fire this, it was meant for this. You don't often get a personal story with it.
mm,
Right. So we had a sizable collection before the museum was started. So we kind of just took what we thought would be the most interesting vehicles and selected those, about 20 of them, to put on display, and especially ones with a story. And the hard part is we have X amount of engineer vehicles. We have like three in the museum, and you'd want to tell the story of World War II as a whole, which is a massive job on its own. But we also want to highlight these certain areas that are important to us and also important for the history of the of World War II. So we kind of had to pick and choose, and it was difficult in some cases because certain vehicles or items we couldn't put on display yet. Others we did because they might be integral to the story. Um, like we have a pretty sizable collection of D-Day items, airborne items, items for the landing forces,
oh, wow.
which is obviously, I think, one of everybody's favorite topics of World War II. It's one of mine. But we want to hit upon the home front. So we have a vehicle from the home front. We dedicate a pretty large area of the exhibit to that about what happened with production and things like that in stateside, which was massively important.
Mm,
But yeah, we kind of had to sculpt things to fit the story we wanted to tell. And we had to purchase a couple pieces for that. Some we might have had to sell or pass on, but luckily we did have a lot of the right equipment to begin with. But we were definitely hunting down for certain items leading up to the opening of the museum, and we still are. But the nice thing is that we have a lot of friends that have loaned items, and there's a lot of gracious people out there that have donated items as well because they want their items to have a good home. They want the history of maybe their grandfather to be told at the World War II American Experience.
Yeah, fascinating. And is it something that, like, regarding the curation and the telling of the stories, because obviously there are, as you mentioned, like so many stories across the war. It was a world war. Is this something that you're going to change a lot in your museum, or because you said you're going to keep growing, you're going to keep, expanding as such? Is changing or would you always have like a baseline exhibition that's kind of going remain and then just add to it with season things? How does that work?
Absolutely. We'll definitely keep the main baseline, the framework, if you will, of the war, of our collection, and of the museum's collection together. But for example, there are certain pieces that we can swap out pretty regularly, like in a lobby with we have a whole collection of very important Jeeps, starting from the prototype with the American Bantam, going all the way through the civilian Jeep after the war.
Wow.
We swap some of the tanks out. Right now, we have several pieces of artillery on display. Uh,
Mm,
but there's so many stories to get into, and that's what we're still doing is taking an item like an 8-inch howitzer and maybe pulling out a GI story that was on a crew of one. And
mm,
that's something that people don't usually think about. We think about infantry, we think about airborne,
mm,
the Army, Air Forces, Navy, that kind of thing, Marine Corps. But when you get into the more the specialized things like field artillery engineers, that's we hit upon that pretty heavily. And I think that's just because of our vehicular connection and
mm,
because of the people that inspired us along the way.
mm,
So we're going to try and get into that a little more. But I would hope with expansion in the future, a lot of people say, are you going to get into Vietnam and Korea? And I always say we're going to do something for those guys. We're going to do something for that era, but we have a lot more to do with World War II history. We have a lot of items that are on display, a lot more people to honor with that.
mm,
Yeah, yes, with a museum. I mean, and the footfall, people that come and they come in coaches or whatever. There needs to be a time frame. Like you can't just change it up every 3 months. Otherwise, someone might be like, "Well, I wanted to come and see howitzers or whatever, but you've moved them all." So I
Right.
guess it's kind of a slow moving process as well. Whilst you get everybody through, and there'll probably come like a saturation point where you think, "All right, I think the footfall's fallen off because anybody who's going to come and see it is coming to see it. So now we'll upgrade what we're doing, or we'll move in another direction." I do think on your point, I think soon, and I don't know if I can put a date on it, but soon the Korean War is going to start being more in people's consciousness. I think now because of the amount of veterans that are still alive there, and the fact that the story's not really been told
mm,
of the police action in Korea and everything. So, I mean, the longevity of your museum is almost entirely guaranteed because of that.
mm,
Yeah, and it's a sad thing that we as a country we haven't done more for the Korean War vets, and they're getting up in age, and we definitely need to capture that history with those individuals before it's too late.
yeah.
And I hope that people see the importance of talking to those vets and saving that history before it's too late. But yeah, we can certainly do something for them. And the interesting thing is, in Korea, we still used a lot of World War II equipment, so
Yeah.
it would be fairly easy to take something we already have and parlay it into telling a story about an individual in the Korean War.
Well, a lot of guys served in both as well. There's that as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That must be
Exactly.
nuts.
Ron Spears served in Korea as well.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's a good
Yeah.
jumping off point there. And for those of you listening, if you haven't seen it, I think it's on Netflix. I'm not sure. Chosin, the documentary about the battle there, is a very good starting point on the Korean conflict because, I mean, it was absolutely brutal and sort of didn't play out how you think it would do. It was very, very cold and horrible. And there's a lot of stories to be told there.
Mm,
But if I could just change tack a little bit and I'm first of all, I'm really sorry for your loss. I know your father passed away in December, right around exactly the same time my mama did, actually. And I'm terribly sorry for your loss there. It's really painful, I know. Um, were, were you sort of ready to take over the curatorship, the presidency? And how much does your father's legacy sort of inspire you, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. I wouldn't say I was ready. I mean, is anybody ever ready for a job like that? It's almost like you could take any. I don't want to compare it to any of the massive tasks of World War II, but I don't think any of those guys would ever say they were ready. But it's time to step up to the plate and keep the ball rolling. Yeah, it was very sudden. He was a very young acting man for his age, 82, still driving big equipment and tanks and vehicles and everything else. But yeah, I'm fortunate in this situation because I can carry my father's legacy on. A lot of people can't necessarily do that, but with a museum, with his vision, we can certainly do that, and it's inspiring for me. I never thought I'd be involved in a museum like this. When I was in college or high school, we weren't necessarily talking about opening a museum. So it definitely, yeah, inspires me to keep this project going, keep his vision alive, and also uh, continue the project that he, along with my mother, started. And I'm fortunate because we have a lot of great support, a lot of volunteers, a lot of people that are helping out. But yeah, I definitely want to complete this task and see that it goes beyond my lifetime.
Mm.
In
What's the most, sorry, man.
No,
What
no,
what
crack on.
what's the most interesting or joyful part of your job as the president now? Is it kind of, I mean, I see, for our listeners, Adam is sitting in front of a very comprehensive bookcase, which I imagine has every book written on machinery used in conflict. I'm pretty sure over the 20th century, perhaps. But what is the most interesting part for you? Is it the researching into the vehicles? Is it the tracking down of them, or is it the stories of the men and women that operated them? Or is it being front of house in the museum and seeing, visitors coming in or veterans turning up? What's the most joyous or interesting? What's the most valuable part to you?
A couple points. I would say one would be, for example, at our military weekend show in July, which is an annual event we host every July, last full weekend in July. We have about 100 military vehicles there on display. We drive Sherman tanks, half tracks around. There's an entire encampment with reenactors set up, even have a Huey helicopter fly in, fully restored. But this year we had about 15 to 20 World War II vets. One of them, who I've met before, really great guy, Harry Miller, was in an independent tank battalion during the war in an Easy 8 Sherman with a 105 millimeter howitzer, which we happen to have the same exact tank that he used during the war. And another man named Bud Gass from Baltimore was on a 57 millimeter anti-tank gun crew. And what happened to be at the show? One of those, and a live one. So he got to fire that 57 millimeter gun and ride in an M7 Priest self-propelled gun, and Harry got to ride in a Sherman tank just like he would have ridden in World War II. So that moment for me not only gave me goosebumps and um, might have made my eyes water a little bit because it's an amazing sight, but that to me is what it's all about right there. And another point is bringing the public in and sharing these items because it's cool to have them, but it doesn't mean anything unless you can share them with the public and educate people. So, along with interacting with the veterans, to me, my favorite part with that is interacting with the public and giving tours and seeing the light bulb go off in their head and seeing people get engaged in this history.
Mm.
And there's nothing more rewarding when giving a tour than having a group that asks a lot of great questions and takes a great interest into what you're talking about and the stories from World War II. So I get great enjoyment from both of those.
It sounds very
Have
similar,
you?
Matt, doesn't it, to Andy Biggio and the rifle?
Yes, no, very, yeah,
When he
very
puts
much
the
so.
rifle in the veterans'
Yeah,
hands, their
yeah,
eyes light up like they
yeah,
probably
yeah.
haven't held one since 1945, you
Right.
know, and then, it must be.
And I
That's the
spoke
first thing I
about this.
thought when you said that. I totally understand what you're saying. That must be quite an incredible sensation to actually witness that, which is then going
Yeah,
back. Yeah, that's cool.
I spoke about this at Adams Museum at the event, at the symposium I did with Henry Sledge. Exactly that you just said.
Mm.
But also because we've talked a lot to Matt Mabe from the 100th Bomb Group Foundation, and it's like guys, with a cane being helped, towards a B-17, and suddenly the hatch will go down, and they'll just scrabble up that they're 19. Like for that few moments, it's like, what just happened? And Andy, like you say, Andy would say that that guy would be in the chair and not really with it and everything. And he puts an M1 in their hand. It's like, the thing's stripped. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
bam,
yeah.
they've just come back to being 19, 20 years old. It's quite incredible.
Wow.
It really is. Yeah, they go back to being a teenager again. A number of years ago, we were filming a TV show, The Weapon Hunter, here, and we had the Sherman tank on that documentary, and we also had Pee Wee Martin here.
Oh yeah.
And he fired an M1 Garand against the host, who fired a German equivalent, and of course, Pee Wee outshot him, did better. But after the filming, we gave Pee Wee a ride on the Sherman tank, and I was going to get him a ladder, and before I knew it, he was standing on top of the tank, looking down at me, saying, "Are you ready to go?" So
Wow, that's
Wow, that's cool.
incredible.
Do you get a lot of what's the age of the main visitors? I mean, do you get a lot of young people, or is this now? Because I think
Yeah,
I
that
think
that
the
was
thing
my
I think the
question.
link, yeah, I think the link with like Band of Brothers and Masters of the Air and Pacific is that it introduced the water a whole lot of younger generation, for far younger than us. And I'm wondering if you are experiencing or observing the same sort of thing in the museums. Is this happening?
we absolutely are. We get a lot of families, a lot of school groups, and people of all ages. And the cool thing is with the younger audiences, some of them can walk in and tell you about the armament on the tank or the thickness of the armor, tell you about some of the specs on the equipment because of the different games that are out there.
Mm,
Yeah, right.
So that
And
certainly keeps that interest going.
mm,
is that something that the museum is interested in doing as well? Not games, obviously, because they're bonkers expensive, but a more sort of interactive virtual thing as well for young people. Is that something you're looking into? Do you think it's necessary? Um, because sometimes I think it's not in a way. I mean, there's certain bits of it, but I think young people are just as interested in the museum as is. I don't think you need to start being like, oh, I need to be down with the kids and make it virtual and have games. It's like, do they need that? They're quite intelligent. You don't need to sort of spoon feed them stuff in technology.
mm,
Right. A couple points there. We are looking into it. I think it's beneficial with aspects of the war that you can't necessarily duplicate. Like we can't put an aircraft carrier in the museum. You can't necessarily put them in the seat of a Hellcat fighter plane. I guess you could. But when you want to try and convey some of those components of the war to them, like in Normandy, you go to certain museums and you hop in a C-47 and go into D-Day, that kind of thing. That's pretty cool.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah,
you get
certainly you
experience.
don't want to do things that you could demonstrate with the real item. Um, but for me, I when I go to a museum and I look at an item and I actually take time to immerse myself into the the history behind an item and read the information. I enjoy that aha moment when you're looking at an artifact and you read the history and so carried this and used this, and to me that's pretty impactful. So I think you're right. Sometimes the virtual experience is not necessary if you can uh, bridge that gap and
mm.
connect a couple of different thoughts there with the viewer. That might be more impactful to them than just creating artificially.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like you say, it's about, as you said earlier, it is about, when you have the hardware there, it is about connecting to the audience via the humans that operated them, and the stories, the personal stories of what they went through and where they were in the world and what they were fighting, and you know what I mean, and what were conditions like and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's those human elements of that really connect anybody together in any kind of scenario where you're visiting a museum or even a modern art gallery or anything. It's always the human stories behind it, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, you could be looking at the inside of a Sherman tank and thinking about the crew members, what they went through, maybe in the Battle of the Bulge. Or
Mm,
you could look at a helmet that was worn by a paratrooper that jumped into Normandy and then
mm,
went on to fight at Market Garden. And when you have that history, you stand there and you look at it with a completely different lens. Some
mm,
people that don't read, and sometimes I do that too. They don't get that. Oh, there's a helmet that looks cool, has a spade on the side, but when you walk up to it and you read the history, you go, "Oh my gosh,
mm,
wow! Like this was at this location at this time," and it's a totally different picture in your
mm.
mind.
Because like modern warfare, obviously, I don't know if you follow what's happening in Ukraine, but tanks and artillery are the mainstay of the current war. And a lot of the tanks that they're using are from the 1940s, 50s. I mean, I've seen news reports of Ukrainians using artillery from the 1940s. It's just insane. And tanks that are from the like mid 40s or early 50s that don't actually run, but they're installed in a position and their gun works, but the tank can't. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy to think, isn't it? But these things are still getting used to defend countries now. I mean, wow.
It certainly is, yeah. And look at some of the pieces of equipment that we used in World War II. We used them through Vietnam.
Mm,
Some things like the 105 millimeter howitzer, or,
mm,
or better yet, the 50 caliber, the M2.
mm,
That's been around for
yeah.
decades, and you just can't improve on something like that. But yeah, it's a terrible thing in Ukraine, and but yeah, it is interesting to see the equipment, and I think some of those tanks they even pulled out of off display pedestals and out
Yeah.
of government museums.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. What I'm interested to see, obviously, your father was a great collector, and I'm just interested to know what is this how your interest peaked? Obviously, I mean, did you or did you work on these machinery? Did he have a workshop where he was sort of fixing them up? Is this how you got into it? Or did you study history at school? Or yeah, how did your interest peak? Obviously, outside of the obvious one of having your father purchasing all these pieces of equipment. Was it always fascinating to you, or did it take you a while to sort of come around to it?
I was born into it. I was told my first word was Jeep, so I
Oh,
have
okay.
known nothing else. But yeah, and I'm very fortunate for that. I inherited all the interests that my dad had, from antique cars to military vehicles to history. So what he
Mm,
was into, I'm into. And yeah, all the books that he had, these books here, I grew up looking at them, pulling them down, looking at photos. I always loved the Then and Now series with all the World War II battlefields growing up. And I was fortunate enough to go to some of those then and
mm.
learn about them in person. But yeah, I want to carry on that interest, and I've tried to explore some other hobbies, but and yeah, they can't trump this. And I
Such
realize
as
this is
what have you
not a
tried?
hobby anymore. This is a this is a lifestyle,
Yeah,
and it kind of chose me, and that's okay because I enjoy it a lot, and it's very rewarding now with a museum.
yeah.
I have a question. There is a chance, Adam, I might have to leap off in a second just because there's a slight family emergency. Apparently, my son was chewing on a mushroom and my wife's freaking out, but I don't think there's anything bad in it. Uh, so if I chop off, I will come back, but I just want to make sure they're okay. Um, Going forward, it's an expensive hobby now, though, isn't it? I mean, it's got you said to the halcyon days in the 80s where there was basically junked old World War II gear everywhere that you could pick up. I mean, I went to the Kentucky Expo in March, and some of the stuff, the memorabilia on sale there. I mean, a mint SS helmet with the cover on it is north of $25,000. That's the starting off point.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. So if you're listening and your grandfather came home and stuffed something in the attic, I'd go and have a look at it if I were you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. I mean, even just a standard M2 helmet or original web gear, it's getting pricey, and even good reproductions are too. So it's nothing like the 90s when if you wanted to reenact, you'd go out, go to your buddy's store that dealt in military items and get suited up in all original World War II gear and go out and go reenacting. Today, you want to put that original stuff away and display it and get reproductions. And with vehicles, like when my dad was getting into it in the early 80s, you could literally go to a surplus equipment yard. There were several around the East Coast, and there'd be rows and rows of Stuart tanks, rows of Shermans and World War II trucks, and you'd go through and take your pick. And
Wow.
you could be picky about, oh, we want this one with the better condition. Today, you just try and save as much as you can from getting scrapped or deteriorating to time.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, incredible.
Amazing. I didn't even think about that aspect of it. And is it because more people are collecting them, or is it because was there a period of, people scrapping these things, because obviously there's a huge amount of metal in tanks. So what do they weigh, like 40 or 50 tons or something? But is it just because they've become popular, so they become more expensive, or are they rarer, or is there less of them? Or is it a combination?
It's a combination. I would say in the 80s at that time, like the military World War II vehicles were certainly collectible, but they're not like today. Uh, there were still a lot more vehicles sitting around. There were European, well, countries all over the world that were still using them in their current militaries, and some still are being. But at that time in the 80s, 90s, a lot of them were being surplused out by foreign countries. So there
Right.
was an influx of equipment that could be purchased because it was just coming out of these countries' armies.
Mm.
And today, all that stuff has been dispersed into collectors' hands.
Mm.
So it's on the collector market now, and the demand has increased for armored vehicles because of the collectability and people who might have been a kid in the 1950s or 60s and their dad was in World War II and they grew up watching shows like Combat. They say, I've always wanted this vehicle and I might be able to afford it now. So let me see if I can find one. And sure enough, they go on the internet and track one down. And so you get some people that
Yeah,
are
because
new
it's
to the
that
hobby.
yeah, because that sounds like the car market. It's like people like, I see a 1980s Porsche or whatever, and it takes me back to being a kid, and I'd love to own one. You know what I mean? But what
Right.
do you attribute to this sort of resurgence? Is it things like Masters of the Air, Band of Brothers? Do you reckon that kind of helped in any way, or do you reckon it sort of
Yeah.
contributed to this kind of new
Private Ryan.
kind of
Private
way at
Ryan was a
looking
huge
at the
help
war?
point.
Sorry,
Absolutely.
Matt, what did you say?
Yeah.
I said Private Ryan, I think, was the epoch-making moment where suddenly it went from sort of something a few people were interested in, suddenly everybody's like was talking about it, and then it's just like boom, and then of
Yeah,
course Bam, Pacific, and Masters of the Air. But I
yeah.
think that movie just made the whole thing go.
Really?
It went
Yeah,
being something niche to being some mainstream like overnight. I think
yeah.
I would
is that
definitely
right?
agree. Yeah. You go to shows, you go to reenactments, you see a lot more. You see tons of guys dressed up in paratrooper gear. You
Mm.
go to Europe for a commemoration like on D-Day, you'll see more Jeeps marked up 101st Airborne 506 PIR than
Yeah,
I think the whole division had in World War II.
Yeah.
yeah, they
So
definitely
it
got more
certainly
men
did a
there.
lot for the popularity.
Mm.
Um, is there anything you want to ask us about Band of Brothers?
Yeah, I would say, what are we, 23 years after it came out? Looking back, like, how does it feel being involved in something of that magnitude? Because going into it, you probably had no idea what you're getting involved in and the success that it would have. So maybe just talk a little bit about how that kind of panned out and what it did for your guys' lives afterwards.
Well, I'll start just in case I have to run off and take my son to a mushroom specialist. Um, it's a good question, and I'll answer it in two ways. Initially, there was the filming of it and the mind blowing experience, and then there was quite a big lull to for me till about 2018 because I didn't wasn't in contact with a lot of the guys. I didn't know about what was happening in Normandy. I kind of knew some stuff would happen in Normandy, but I hadn't been. And then I did a tour with the World War II Museum in 2018. Um, and I was just blown away. I was like, oh my goodness. Like you say, everywhere you go, there's people dressed as the 101st guys, and there's museums that have come out of it, and there's like whole touring industries and battlefield tour guides. And it it's quite incredible. But it's incredible in a strange way because that was a show, it was an acting job. But then to have that sort of light a fire and then all the real stories come to life, and some of them are quite fringe, in the show or whatever. To have those real stories come to life is pretty incredible. Guys, I'm gonna have to step off. I've got to. I'm sorry to everybody. I've got my son's just down. I'm just gonna have to inspect him. You guys crack on without me. It's been great talking to you.
All right,
Thank
Matt.
you. Good luck.
Take it easy, Matt.
Cheers, man.
So one of the questions I'd like to ask is like, well, for me, getting back to answer your question, I think for me, I was very similar to Matt. I kind of sort of stepped away from it. My career was, going okay with regular kind of ups and downs, but it was, continuing, and you just go from other jobs to other jobs. And it probably was a little bit earlier than 2018. Well, it's probably around about the same time, 2016 to 2018, when a lot of the American guys were doing the reunions with the Airborne, and were doing these, and were coming over to Europe and doing tours as well. I think James Madio did a few. Ross McCall did quite a few, I remember, but I never went to them. It's very similar to Matthew's experience. And then sort of 2017, 2018, when a lot more of the British guys started doing them, that I kind of realized, wow, how the longevity of it. And it seems to have grown, for the first sort of 5 years after the show, it was obviously a big hit at the time, but then it kind of faded off. But it's really seems to have come back. And I just think it, and what I thought was when the Pacific would come out and when Masters of the Air would eventually come out, which it has done, I thought that the Band of Brothers kind of legacy would kind of fade away because, especially Masters of the Air, it's a technological masterpiece. It just looks incredible. It looks so realistic and so dramatic that I thought that, everyone would kind of forget about the Band of Brothers series quite a lot. But the opposite has happened. It's kind of, even in that company, it still stands out as, because it's a bit more character-led, character-driven, and there's less special effects in it. I think that kind of holds, it's what we call practical enhanced. Instead of a CGI kind of fest, you would have a real explosion and you'd have the real machinery and you'd have, everything there. And then they'll just add in post-production a little bits to enhance the visual picture of it rather than the basis of what you're watching being digital. I think that kind of has really, lasted well. And, the fact that we're all just still friends, that's probably the biggest take for me. I've said that many, many times. It's we are brothers, and I know if ever I'm in dire need or help or in trouble in any way, I turn to any one of these guys and they'll always be there for me. And it's exactly the same the other way around. If one of them that I haven't seen for 15 years or spoke to for 15 years knocked on my door and said he needed a place to stay for the next couple of months, he's staying. That's it. It's not even a discussion. And I kind of like that about it. One thing I wanted to ask you was that on the title sequence of Band of Brothers, that I have a little sequence where I'm riding a motorbike with a sidecar.
Yes.
And I'm trying to remember what kind of vehicle. I'm pretty sure. Would it have been a Harley Davidson?
I believe you were on a Harley WLA.
Do you have any of those in your collection?
We do. We have a WLA on display, no sidecar, and we have an Indian 741 on
And
display.
were they used? What were they primarily used for then? What was the basis of a motorcycle and sidecar? Was it used by obviously because I was an airborne infantry. Was it mainly infantry units, and how were they utilized?
Military police units had them. Um, some reconnaissance units had them as well. The British, I'll go into that because we have a couple British bikes on display. Uh, they used them to transport messages from unit to unit. Dispatch riders had the canvas bags that carry the documents and messages from one unit to the other. And
Well, actually, on the front line, you would see them around. Like, oh, really?
yeah,
Wow.
and they were those guys lived off of their, lived on their bikes. If they had to bivouac along the road somewhere on their motorcycle, they did that.
Mm,
But yeah, useful piece of equipment. Easy to get around if you're trying to handle a convoy, that kind of thing. Military police directing maybe
mm,
a truck convoy, Red Ball Express, something like that.
mm. And was that because obviously changing the subject slightly, you know, because I'm into motorbikes now and I haven't investigated it that much, but obviously the start of like the biker gang thing was really post-war. Was it was it was it with World War II machinery? Is this where the whole Harley thing came around and the biker gangs? Because I kind of got the sense I've seen many photos where you would see obviously guys that had come to Europe were on the battlefront riding um, uh, World War II, even in green paint Harley Davidsons, wearing like, I don't know, the top half of a tank suit as a jacket or an airman's jacket or something like that. Did that kind of lend to that whole outlaw thing? Did that all really start post-war? Do you know anything about that? I mean, the question's a little bit off what we both do, but I was just wondering if you have any.
Yeah, a little bit. I think a couple things go into play there. When you look at the automotive, the achievements in the automotive industry
Mm,
from pre-World War II to post-World War II, you look at an average car, you look at a motorcycle, a truck, you take something from like 1938, 1935, any year there, compare it to something in 1946 or even during World War II. I
mm,
mean, the difference is massive. You look at a Model A Ford and then you look at a Ford built after the war,
yeah.
world of difference. And I think that with motorcycles, they didn't change too much in World War II, but they were certainly a lot different than they were in 1930. And
Mm.
I think for guys coming back from the war, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I think some of them, coming back from something like that, maybe they took to riding and got into that and tried
Kind
to
of makes sense,
harness
doesn't
that
it?
camaraderie. Yeah,
Yeah, and that sort of band of brothers thing kind of like it kind of makes sense if that's where it possibly, I don't like again, as you said, I don't know if we're speaking a bit out of turn, but it seems logical, doesn't it? But do you
yeah.
and also with all the machinery do you have any knowledge of the history of like where these things were produced? Like, because a lot of factories weren't they I mean, they weren't all building war machinery before the war. How did that happen? Did the government kind of sequester like a car factory and then turn it into something else? Do you know anything about how all the kind of mechanicals of all that worked? Like what was produced where and were there car companies involved actually building military hardware? Because we know of the famous ones that mainly are in aircraft manufacture, like Lockheed and all these things, and the kind of were already making aircraft, military aircraft, and just continue to do so. But how did they build all the war machines?
So all these companies in the United States at that time, let's say you're making refrigerators. Well, the demand for refrigerators is decreased drastically during World War II. So, like Nash Kelvinator that made fridges, they started making 3/4 ton and 1 ton cargo trailers.
Yeah.
Ford, they're no longer making cars after spring in 1942 when the government halted automotive production. So Ford, great example, started building Sherman tanks, trucks, Jeeps, tank destroyers, bombers, armored cars. So there's a great example. Yeah, all these companies had to figure out a way to retool and survive during the war. Uh, Put a bid in for a contract to build something for the war. You see a lot of examples of that. My grandfather, during the war, was in charge of a factory that built rifle grenades.
Mm.
And before the war, in civilian times, they built equipment for telephone lines.
Mm.
So completely different items,
Mm.
but they had to build something for the war. They couldn't build what they did during peacetime. So these companies had to survive. And what's interesting is York, Pennsylvania, which is about a little less than an hour east of here, was a model for the entire United States on how companies in towns could retool for the war effort.
Mm.
It was called the York Plan. And York at that time was an industrial powerhouse. They produced many different things. And a great example, and we showcase this, excuse me, in the museum, a company called York Safe and Lock that built locks and safes. They retooled and built the 37 millimeter anti-tank gun. So when you go in our museum, you see one of their safes right
Yeah.
behind a 37 millimeter gun. So it makes
Wow.
that connection for people. But yeah, these companies had to survive. And there was a plethora of items that need to be produced. You look at things like web gear, helmets, the liners, chin
Mm.
straps, trucks, and then all the parts that go into supporting those vehicles.
Mm.
And what's interesting is all those items, and I like this from a collector standpoint. You pull out a piece of web gear, and it has stamped on the back the year it was made, the company that made it, and it might be some little company in the middle of nowhere, and
Mm.
then a larger company might have made the same thing. So it's kind of cool to see how companies did get involved in manufacturing for the war effort, and that's part of why we were able to win the war is because everybody joined together and we were united and won.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously before you sent troops, it was the Lend-Lease Act. Was
Hmm.
it? So you were supplying the hardware sort of long before any American troops kind of hit the ground in Europe. So it was something that was, the industrial might of America was really in full swing there, and it was well, it saved us. So thanks very much.
You're welcome.
So going forward, you said expansion is obviously part of on your mind. Do you and But do you have any other plans in the future? Is there anything else of interest? Do you travel around and look at other museums in the States? Do you have any traveling sort of things? And what kind of plans have you got for the immediate future? Obviously, I guess it's the school holidays over here in the States. So I guess you must have been busy being in a museum in the last few weeks and months. Uh,
Absolutely. We definitely were. And we're in Gettysburg, which people might think, why is a World War II museum in Gettysburg? But there's actually several connections with World War II. But the good thing is we have a lot of tourist traffic here.
right.
So people that are interested in the Civil War are likely to be interested in World War II, and that's proven to be a fact. A lot of people come out, especially during the summer.
Mm.
But yes, I was lucky enough to be in Normandy in June. Went to a lot of museums, saw a lot of cool setups, displays, encampments. Got a lot of inspiration there. I like to go to a lot of different shows stateside
Mm.
and also museums and continue to get ideas, see how we can further enhance our exhibit.
Mm.
But we have a lot of events at the museum all year round, book talks, seminars, workshops.
Oh, wow.
People can come in on occasion. We do rides in vehicles.
Yeah.
Like when Matt was there, we did rides for that group with an M3 half track. We have our military weekend show next July. And also we do things around certain holidays, like Christmas time is pretty cool. We get into the home front. We do a large World War II era train layout. And we also display one of the taxi cabs that was used in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, which people get
Cool.
a pretty big kick out of. So
Wow.
it's not all combat tanks and trucks. We do hone in on the home front quite a bit. But people can keep up to date with this on Facebook, give us a follow, or
Yeah,
go on our website.
what are your, just to end on, what are your social medias? What's your handle on Facebook, Instagram? If you'd just like to read them all out for the listeners, would be great.
Sure. Yeah, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram at World War II American Experience. Websites visit WW2.com, and that is the number two, visit worldwar2.com. And yeah, we're open 5 days a week right now. So yeah, if people are in the area, they can come visit. Or if people want to do a private tour, we can do that, or we can accommodate certain groups. If they want to have like a dinner or a special event there, just like W. Britton's, they had their whole symposium at the museum, 3-day event. It was a lot of fun. It was really cool seeing what they're up to with their new releases on soldiers and vehicles that they're making, and talking to the enthusiasts. But yeah, we're, like I said, open for 2.5 years so far, and a lot of great things in the making right now. Definitely, um, we try to be like a living, breathing museum. It's not just static. Everything runs. We have a lot of events. People can see this stuff in action, get the sensory experience,
Wow.
see, smell, hear these pieces of equipment, and we really try to hit upon the stories of the guys behind all this equipment and the war.
That sounds fantastic. I'd love to visit it one day. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Adam. It's been a real pleasure to meet you, and it sounded like Matthew really enjoyed his visit. And yeah, I wish you really well for the future. And yeah, come back on soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thanks. Take care, Adam.
You
Cheers, mate.
too. Thank you.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed listening to that. That was Adam Buck and Matthew with Half Naked for most of the podcast. For anyone who's going to watch on YouTube, I'm sure that will be fun. But thanks ever so much for listening. And unless I have anything else, no, I think that's it. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you soon.